I find innovation to be one of those funny concepts, and we have about 20 minutes to do this panel, which is just enough time to cover everything, so we'll be fine. I really, actually, I'm very glad that we have this particular mix of folks involved in this panel, and one of the reasons for that is it's a highly diverse set of folks. So we have automotive, we have, arguably personal, financial, and tax-related kind of software, followed by also, one of the largest and oldest banks. And so when you really kind of, peel back the onion of what innovation is, I think we've got a really interesting cross-section of folks to be able to talk about it and different models that are involved. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a little bit of the challenges, some of the things that tactically work, some of the ideas really around kind of culture, product, size of company, age of company, what those influencing factors are that differentiate how you each do innovation within your organizations. And I always like to lead with, whenever we talk about innovation, there's a famous quote by Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, "The definition of a classic is a book that everyone wants to have read, but nobody wants to read." I think that innovation is the same thing. Organizations find themselves in this position where they want to say they're innovative, but it's very difficult to actually achieve that. And it's actually probably tied to really the growth aspects, right? When you think about it, innovation leads to growth, and growth stifles innovation. So it's a really kind of catch-22 moment. I think what I'd like to do is maybe if each of you could introduce yourselves and in line with that, maybe share what does innovation mean for your organization and in your role, and maybe talk a little bit about just kind of that function of what you're doing today, and then we can get into a few questions. Do you want to lead, Jim?
Sure. My name is Jim Adler. I'm the founding managing director of Toda AI Ventures. I'm an engineer by training, serial entrepreneur. Most of my career, Toda AI Ventures is the first structured venture capital fund within Toyota, and we're focused on AI, data cloud, early stage investments around autonomous mobility and robotics. So really want to tap into the disruptive signals from startups that are in the marketplace. We launched last July. We've done about 10 deals, announced 8. And so from Toyota's perspective, the company actually pivoted 2 cars in the 1930s from industrial cloth-making equipment, looms, and that entrepreneurial fervor and passion still exists within the company. I was really pleasantly surprised to learn that. So at the very top, there's this great entrepreneurial energy. There's 370,000 folks below that top management that are just trying to make the safest, most reliable cars on the planet. And it's hard for them to think innovatively. And so getting them out of their comfort zone is not their mission. Their mission is completely different. And so we can talk about how to create disruption within such a venerable and established company. But it's a challenge.
Well, and especially with all the recent news and things around kind of concerns about autonomous vehicles.
That's right.
I imagine there's kind of that real big war inside. And the organization is, what, about 80 years old?
About 80 years old, that's
so
right.
that also poses a challenge. And I think I saw somewhere it takes about, what, 2 to 4 years to actually design a car from concept to release?
That's right.
And within that, maybe Ashok, when you introduce yourself, can you talk a little bit, does it take 2 to 4 years to release kind of that next, schedule in terms of a product for Intuit, or?
So I'll answer that question. My name is Ashok Srivastava. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Intuit. Started about 5 months ago. And the charter of the team that I run is to develop new techniques in artificial intelligence and machine learning to essentially power prosperity for people around the world. If you look at what's going on in society today, a lot of it has to do with economics, microeconomic and macroeconomic factors. And the fact is that a company like Intuit is well positioned to help people in their normal lives make better financial decisions. And so if you think about the combination of AI, data, and machine learning, bringing these things together and helping people make those decisions better, that's essentially what we're doing. So it's a great pleasure to be here. The company has been in operation for more than 30 years, and the fact is that as we build and scale new products to a global marketplace, we're finding that the use of data is coming in a variety of forms. It's not only through the use of analytics in order to understand what the customer needs are and what they want. It's also being used in real, what we call follow me homes, where we go and meet with customers and essentially document and understand the needs that they have in running their business or in their personal finances. So this process allows us to innovate very quickly, and it's something that we're really looking forward to pushing forward.
And I imagine you're doing, releases every day of, updates and software, which is a very different kind of model than 2 to 4 years from concept to actual execution, right?
Absolutely.
So I imagine there's different challenges, and I can't wait to get into it.
Absolutely.
Maybe Yifat, if you can.
Sure. So pleasure to be here. My name is Yifat. I work for a bank that's 115 years old. So I think we're competing on who's more traditional. I'm first place. What I'm actually doing in the bank, I joined the bank after a long period of time making investments on the VC side. And I actually joined to start a new operation that was supposed to bring a new type of banking towards the technology startups. They do require different banking. They are a little different than all the other industries we're treating. We look to them like we're old news, so we had to reinvent ourselves and be able to provide them with services the way they want to consume them from people who can actually help them with their businesses when they start out. We started this almost 4 years ago. We're working today with a very large portion of the Israeli startup community, more than 4,500 companies, both in Israel, all Israeli related in Israel, Palo Alto here, New York, and London. And I'm actually wearing 2 hats because I'm also working for a bigger operation, which is the Leumi Bank, that although being very traditional for many years, have led the innovative sort of traction within the Israeli banking ecosystem. We can dive into it later. We're the first in Israel and still the first to introduce our own disruption by ourselves. And maybe we can touch upon it later with some new retail banking operations that we have.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, there's a kind of a famous example, right? Innovation, I think a lot of people sometimes will think of it as synonymous with disruption. But in many cases, it doesn't have to be, right? Sometimes there are very simple ways. I always love the famous example of the ketchup bottle, right? When you have the old ketchup bottle, there's that little bit that was kind of watery at the top that nobody likes, and it was kind of a problem. And so they looked into all kinds of different ways to fix it, and what they did is they eventually turned the ketchup bottle upside down, right? So didn't change the recipe of the product, but changed the packaging. And I think some of that from a brand perspective is often what has to be done, especially if you're moving from 115-year-old stodgy bank to, kind of new, exciting tech operations. I think, one of the biggest challenges to innovation, I'd say, is, especially from a corporate perspective and just kind of from my conversations day in, day out with technologists, with business operations leaders, it's getting a model that works, right? The same model that applies to a, 370,000 person company with a Japanese culture that has a very particular approach needs a different model than somebody with, almost, dare I say it, a startup culture that really is kind of at the foundation of what Intuit, really was created for, much more of a, Silicon Valley type operation compared to Israeli culture, and, having a whole other kind of host of associated challenges within those structures. So maybe, and from Jim, from your side, since you're largest, even though, Yifat is oldest, I think perhaps maybe you can share, how does your model from an innovation perspective, what does it work? What's the tactical inner workings that allow you to actually be successful with innovation?
Well, I think there's 2 sides to it. I think you have to identify innovation, which is where the investments come in and a lot of the work we're doing with startups and internal innovation efforts. But the inside side is how do you culturally prepare certain elements of the culture or the company to accept that innovation. And you don't have to do it across the organization all at once. I like to collect these Rosetta Stones within the organization that are folks that understand entrepreneurship and innovation. They also understand Toyota. They also understand technology. And so they could help translate these ideas to within the culture of the organization. And I collect these individuals that I've only been at Toyota less than 2 years. So collecting these folks and understanding how do you translate this kind of innovation into momentum for an initiative is really key. Because you can't just jam it into the organization, the immune response is inevitable and undeniable, and you have to prepare for that immune response and then manage it and navigate it. And the metaphor I like to think about, it's almost like threading a needle, right? You have to push it in, and then you have to pull it through. And if you just push it in, like preparing the organizational, operational aspects of the company, but you don't have top executives pulling it through, it never goes anywhere. Conversely, if you just try to pull it through, but you never push it in, an executive can scream until they're blue in the face to say this is what they want. But if the organization just slow walks it and doesn't really move, they're going to be ineffectual as well. So you have to work high, you have to work low, and it requires a level of patience and puzzle solving, actually, to kind of simultaneously solve those equations.
Well, and look, Japanese culture is a very different kind of culture too, where I think there's a lot of structure, a lot of dependency on kind of hierarchy and scale. I'd imagine for Israeli culture, it's much more about independence and much more about kind of a strength of idea coming to the forefront. Are you finding the same kind of structural challenges? Does that same tactic work inside of your organization?
So again, we're a bank. We're not a high-tech company, but one of the things we've been doing for the past decade is being more digital, and we've been very persistent in that. Even before the fintech evolution started and everybody was doing fintech in the world. And about 5 years ago, all these new startups are coming to town, supposedly eating our lunch. Everybody thought banks are going to be done in 5, 10 years. And very quickly, what we found is that there is actually a lot of collaboration. Everybody already understands it's about cooperating with the startups. We are very open to open innovation. We're doing a lot of these things. However, a very certain fintech evolution that started was what is called the challenging banks. And we started seeing all kinds of very little groups starting to form new banks, new retail banks. And our CEO, who, like I said before, decided that she doesn't want to be disrupted because she's going to want to disrupt ourselves. And she decided that we're going to have our own sort of challenging bank. Within our bank, we had a different logo or a different brand. We hired a completely new set of people, which are all tech-oriented or background people. It was located in a separate place than the rest of the bank. And it was sort of growing our own startup with the entire rank from people from the outside, however, getting a lot of endorsement from our CEO. This was a very important project for her. The product is called Pepper. It's a new bank. We are disrupting our own business because some of our clients who are paying are moving to this new fully digital, all mobile, free banking service. So some of our clients are obviously moving to that. But also some of our competitor clients are moving to that. And we're starting to accumulate a business that's a whole new business for us, which I think sort of overcame the issues of how do you innovate because it's already a proven model.
And you said it's called Pepper?
Pepper.
Why? No reason.
Oh, if I was good in branding, I wouldn't be a banker. So.
Fair enough. And so yeah. I think that's actually a really good example of two separate models, right? I'll call it venture innovation model, the ability to kind of bring those types of investments back versus literally a separate operating entity. Ashok, in your business, I think you're actually within the confines of kind of the day-to-day. So maybe within your organization, because it is a different culture, and I think obviously you guys have grown very quickly. I think at an organizational level, now you're about 8,000 employees, somewhere roughly, right? But you're 1/45th the size of Toyota. So at an execution level, what are the challenges you see? Is it similar within your model? Is this, kind of data innovation concept working? And actually, maybe one other point to that, it feels like, if you gather enough data on a person and an individual to help them make decisions, which I realize is kind of your charter, at what point does that become creepy? And how do you stay away from, kind of gathering too much and that privacy issue?
Yeah. So the heart of innovation at Intuit is really a customer empathy, an understanding of the customer's situation, his or her desires and aspirations from a financial perspective, and kind of codifying that. Now, if you branch out from that a little bit, you see customer-driven innovation, this idea, again, where the customer is centric, but then also technology-driven innovation. And the way these things come together to help us innovate at a rapid rate is as follows. What we do is actually have employees, literally all 8,000 of the employees, go out and meet customers who are running small businesses in their local area and observe and understand what's happening there. So this is kind of a critical part of the entire design culture and the innovation culture. But simultaneously, we have strong analytics teams that are looking at the data to see how these things come together. Now, you bring up an important point as you look at the data and so forth. At what point should we be moving into the data space and understanding, and at what point does it become creepy? So it's something I've thought about quite a lot, and I'd say that the approach that we're taking is to essentially ensure that we are looking at aggregate anonymous data as we're making decisions about product features, about functionality, and so forth. What that allows us to do is to see aggregate behavior, understand trends and patterns, and then build innovative capabilities and solutions within the product that are really agnostic from a specific person's data set. And this gives us enough separation, I think, that it allows us to innovate at fast speed, but it also prevents us from getting into difficult situations.
That's good. So we only have a couple of minutes left. What I'm going to ask for is if you can give us a prediction, something that is cool, something that's going to change, something that's the real direction that you're taking your firm from an innovation perspective, whether that's something that's an investment you're looking at or an investment you just did that's particularly exciting, some of the innovation of what's that product, that user experience that you really want to strive for from a data perspective, or what's going to be kind of that next level of what Pepper really kind of delivers. Maybe give you each kind of one chance to share what's that future innovation you're striving for and something cool that's really kind of tied to it. Maybe Jim, if you want to start.
Sure. So I think what you're going to see in automotive industry is an incredible disruption. I think what you're going to see is companies like Toyota enter into markets that are relatively unpredictable. Our investments are not just in automotive. They're in robotics and data services that very much pulls from Ulrich's point around automotive becoming high-tech before high-tech becomes automotive. I mean, that's an old Ted Sarandos point on Netflix becoming HBO before HBO becomes Netflix. And so disruption means new business models, new business lines, and I expect that in the next 10 years, you're going to see one of the top 10 consumer brands in the world, Toyota, leveraging the trust that consumers have in the brand and in the company, leveraging brand new business lines.
Very cool. Ashok?
I think what you're going to see is the development of technologies that are really seamless in the way they come upon the user, but they allow the user to really make better financial decisions. A lot of us go through our daily work and our daily lives, and we don't think a lot about finance. And yet, the finances is what drives a lot of the behavior that we have. It's an interesting paradigm that we see. As AI and machine learning come into the play here, I think we're going to see a lot of people making better financial decisions, and we really hope that this helps power prosperity all across the world.
Is that going to be my Intuit app on my phone telling me not to buy that thing because it's an impulse buy? Or
in a nice way.
Okay. Yifat?
By the way, Pepper, we have all kinds of functionality telling you you're spending too much and you bought enough shoes for this month, etc.
See, I already know all those things, so that's the problem.
Most people don't want to know.
Yeah.
And then we show, yeah. I actually want to predict something a little different, so I think we've gone a long way in terms of banking on the retail side. We have a lot of information on the users. We know how to predict almost everything they're going to do. And we're a little bit behind, especially in Israel, on the business type credit behavior, and moving more digitally to providing credit offerings to companies as opposed to people based on a lot of big data and analytics, which we're just starting to sort of reveal of how to use that in a smart way.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for sharing what works within your organization in the future. I really appreciate it.